Hi everyone, this is Dr. Nitin Choda and welcome to this episode of Ignition Time. Folks, there's something very interesting going on in the White House. Today, President Biden, there he is, hello President Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris, there she is, hello Vice President, and the US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, hello Miss Yellen, are actually meeting with important business leaders, including Jamie Dimon from JP Morgan Chase and Walmart's Doug McMillon. So it's very interesting that all these key officials, or the president, the vice president, the U.S. Treasury Secretary, should be meeting with these leaders, if you will, with these business leaders. Let's show you this headline on your screen right now from Bloomberg, and the headline reads: Biden hosting CEOs, including Diamond from JP Morgan Chase and McMillan from Walmart, as the Democrats push the aid bill. Now, this is super interesting. Why would the president, the vice president, and the US Treasury Secretary be meeting with these CEOs? Well, as it turns out, President Biden is trying to mount a PR campaign, and I have covered this elsewhere on our channel. But meeting with the CEOs allows him to put pressure on the Republicans. Now, we know that Republicans are traditionally pro-business. So if the CEOs can get on board with Biden, because remember, they provide a lot of campaign money to political parties. They have connections within the Republican Party. They have, the direct access to senators, to lawmakers. What if these CEOs and these companies could then reach out to Republican lawmakers and say, hey, you've got to be able to support the $1.9 trillion stimulus. This could be what the White House is thinking. Now, folks, what's interesting is that the Chamber of Commerce, which is one of the most powerful lobbying groups in Washington, again, they have a lot of connections. They have the ability to get to listen, to get lawmakers to listen to them, potentially even to get the kind of policies that work better for businesses. And remember, the 2017 tax cuts, which provided huge tax cuts to the wealthiest amongst us, the slashing of the corporate tax rate is something that the Chamber of Commerce and all these companies, JP Morgan Chase and Walmart, were very happy about. So the Chamber of Commerce has traditionally aligned itself with the Republican Party, but last year decided to start working more closely with Democrats after some disagreements with what was going on with the Trump administration. Now, folks, like I mentioned, Bloomberg reported that this is an attempt by the Biden administration to emphasize, to get the point across to the Republicans, to specific Republican senators, to get their support. Now, there are certain Republican senators who are not happy with the go it alone approach from the Democrats, and this is important. Here's a comment on your screen from Rob Portman, the senator from Ohio. He said, I'm discouraged that the current administration seems not to be interested in pursuing the bipartisan solution. Good ideas come from both sides of the aisle, as we have found out in the previous 5 COVID packages that we have passed in this Congress. Now, let's hear directly from the White House. The White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki actually chimed in on this today and said that President Biden, the Vice President Kamala Harris, and US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen are meeting with business leaders, with CEOs to discuss the American Rescue Plan and to get feedback on the American Rescue Plan. Let's be clear, the White House isn't going to say, well, we're trying to do this to sort of indirectly get Republicans on board or indirectly put pressure on Republicans. You're not going to hear the White House press secretary saying that, which is why I try and give you the news behind the scenes and help you read between the lines. But let's hear from Jen Psaki at the White House briefing room today about why the President of the United States is meeting with CEOs like Jamie Dimon from JP Morgan Chase and like Doug McMillon from Walmart. Let's roll the tape and hear from Jen Psaki.
Previously in this room, the President and the administration are making the case directly to the country about the need to pass the rescue plan so we can finish the job and get $2,000 into the pockets of working families, so we can reopen schools safely, and so we can get economic relief to struggling Americans and communities. As part of that work, the President, the Vice President, and Treasury Secretary Yellen will meet this afternoon with business leaders to discuss the vital role that the American Rescue Plan will play in saving our economy and getting Americans back to work. Private sector leaders understand how important it is, and we've seen calls from across the political spectrum, from leading business groups to labor and progressive lawmakers, for Congress to act quickly in getting additional economic relief out the door. These calls have been echoed by leading experts and economists who have praised the plan, including top economic advisors to the last 4 presidents, both Democrat and Republican. And analysis after analysis has shown that the economic cost of inaction would be incredibly painful for the American people, something we saw last Friday with the latest month of weak job numbers. But they also know that we have a way to help workers and get our economy back by passing the rescue plan. So a couple of pieces of economic data you all may have seen. A CBO projection last week found that it would take the economy 4 years to bounce back and return to full employment without the rescue plan. Studies by the Brookings Institution and Moody's Analytics found that the economy could recover from the pandemic and return to full employment by the beginning of next year if the rescue plan is enacted. Moody's also found that passing the rescue plan would double economic growth, returning the economy to full employment a full year faster.
That's interesting, huh? Discuss with CEOs the vital role of the American Rescue Plan. Folks, these CEOs, I just want to be clear, they make millions of dollars. Their companies make billions of dollars. So I don't think these CEOs actually understand the suffering of the average American. They do not understand. They don't know how hard it can be to make rent, to keep the lights on, to be able to put food on the table. Because, they they don't think like that. But it's interesting that that the White House press secretary would say that you want to talk to CEOs about the vital role of the American Rescue Plan. In fact, they are the ones who have been the beneficiary of the 2017 tax cuts by the Republicans, which in fact left out the low-income earners and the middle-income earners. Now, in the next segment, Jen Psaki says the president wants to have a conversation with leaders about the country and the economic downturn, potentially to get some ideas from them. But we know that this is an indirect way to try and get across to the Republicans. Remember, when you go from point A to point B, you don't have to go in a straight line. You can sort of go in an indirect path, which is what the Biden administration is clearly doing, not only with this measure, but also with everything that they are doing from a PR standpoint. They're trying to position their $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan as a bipartisan plan. And this is something that Republicans will absolutely not agree with. Let's hear from Jen Psaki about the conversation with these business CEOs. Let's roll the tape.
Specifically, Walmart and JP Morgan, what is the president's ask of those types of companies for this?
I wouldn't look at it through that prism, Jeff. I would look at it as a conversation with leaders who have, Walmart is, of course, one of the biggest employers in the country and states across the country. Obviously, Jamie Dimon is somebody who has been in the business sector for many, many years. So it's more of a discussion about the country and the economic downturn that we've gone through. The president wants to lay out all of the specifics of his plan, hear feedback from them, as he has with many different groups over the past couple of weeks.
Now, there was another really interesting aspect from this press briefing. Jen Psaki was asked to comment on the $75,000 income threshold. I have reported this in another video where I reported that the Democrats, even though the president indicated that he was open to targeting, the Democrats have decided, we're going to keep things the same, except those making over $200,000 would get nothing, even if they have dependents. So it's interesting when Jen Psaki was asked to comment about this. She said the president supports a $75,000 income threshold, meaning the income threshold for single filers for the $1,400 stimulus checks. This is a shift in the position of the White House after signaling that they were open to it. Pretty interesting. Again, you will not hear officials say, well, we backed away from the targeting, which is something that we were open to before. I believe they did this because they didn't want a lower number of people getting the stimulus checks relative to the first and the second stimulus check under former President Trump. In fact, this was pointed out by Bernie Sanders. There he is. What's up, Bernie? And Congresswoman from New York, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. There she is. Hello, Congresswoman. So they pointed out that, hey, if we lower the threshold for the stimulus checks, less people will get the stimulus checks as compared to the first and the second stimulus check. And therefore, the Republicans will say, hey, you helped less people. So this is a pretty interesting situation here. And it looks like the president and the administration and the Democrats were like, oh yeah, that makes sense. So, and then they decided to keep the threshold the same. I have done another video going into these thresholds in more detail, so you definitely want to check that out. Let's roll the tape and hear Jen Psaki's comments, which, if you really think about it, is a bit of a walk back from the administration about the income threshold, because things have changed very quickly over the past 48 hours. Let's roll the tape and hear from Jen Psaki.
President Biden had said he was open to targeting that. So did he sign off on what the Democrats have now put forward?
You mean where the cap stops or where the threshold stops at the top?
The cap stops for the full $1,400. Right now it's $75,000 as opposed to $50,000 or what others like Joe Manchin had proposed. So did he sign off on the latest proposal from them yesterday?
Well, his proposal was originally 75, right, and 150.
Targeting.
And he's open to targeting, which it still will be targeted, because it's about the question of what the threshold goes up to, right? Because prior, in earlier proposals, it had a higher threshold where it went up to a higher income level for families where they would get some version of a check, not the $1,400, right, but a smaller version. So
He's fine with not bringing down that cap at the $75,000 to a $50,000 like others.
he supports that. Where the status of the negotiations is at this point, yes, of the $75,000.
That's it, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned something new. Please click the like button. Please subscribe. Please enable notifications. I would really appreciate that. Also, follow me on Twitter. You'll be able to see what I'm reading. You'll be able to follow along in real time. Our Twitter community is growing very rapidly. Thank you so much. Please click like and subscribe. It really helps out the YouTube algorithm. It makes me want to dance. And it brings a big smile to my face like this. So folks, please do that for me. I would appreciate that. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next episode of Ignition Time. Take care. Bye.